Hi guys, in today's how-to video I want to give some tips and tricks on shooting steel targets during training and matches. I briefly want to touch on the most common types of steel targets in IPSC and USPSA matches. First, the large steel poppers. On the left hand side you have the standard IPSC popper. On the right hand side you have the large steel USPSA popper. I do have to say that in USPSA they can actually use both. Same for the small poppers. You have the IPSC version, then the USPSA version, but again both are used in USPSA. And then the steel plates, the round ones as well as the square ones. Now the real target area for all of these steel targets is actually indicated on the slide with the green markings. Anywhere where you would hit the steel in the green area should, if the steel is calibrated correctly, make the steel fall. Most shooters will actually aim their iron sights or their red dots in the areas as indicated on the slide. But considering that no dot will remain fixed and static on any of these targets, nor do iron sights, it means that your iron sight and your dot will actually move around, and again anywhere where you would hit on a calibrated steel target on that green area should make the steel target fall. Some points of attention, tips and tricks related to shooting steel targets in IPSC and USPSA. First and foremost, as with anything in practical shooting, IPSC or USPSA, make sure that you know and respect the minimum safety distances as they relate to steel targets, any and all steel targets. In IPSC, the minimum distance to respect is 7 meters. If there's a danger and risk of getting closer, you need to work with fault lines, and then the fault lines need to be at minimum 8 meters away from the target. In USPSA, the minimum distance is 23 feet if I'm not mistaken, and if there's a risk of getting too close, you also need to work with fault lines, and there they need to be at a minimum distance of 26 feet. Another very important point as it relates to any types of steel targets is the importance of calibration, proper calibration, regular calibration, so not one time in the beginning of the match, but actually build it in to the process of running stages to make sure that on a regular basis the poppers and any other steel targets are actually calibrated to make sure that all the shooters are treated equally as it relates to steel targets. A quick sidestep: if you see during your course of fire that the popper or any other steel target is actually down before you could engage it, or you are 100% sure that you've engaged the steel target properly and correctly but it doesn't fall, do not and do never stop by yourself unless you are instructed to do so by the RO. He or she will identify the problem and provide you the opportunity to reshoot. But if you stop by yourself, you actually go against the rules, and then you didn't give the RO the chance of actually calling it, and that will probably lead to a whole bunch of big time loss of time, and a couple of penalties, and that will zero your stage, which will have an important impact on your overall match results. As a general principle related to any and all steel targets, respect the steel, respect the steel, respect the steel. Steels can be challenging depending on the distances at which they are placed, as well as the shot difficulties. For example, if you need to engage them with hard left or hard right leans, for example, they do pose a serious challenge. In general, please do not hose or spray and pray steel targets, especially if you have multiple side by side, for example, because that rarely goes well, and you will lose a lot of time. So don't hose these types of steel targets. In general, make sure that any and all steel targets, especially if they are placed at longer distances, take your time, take 1/10 to 1/15 of a second more time to get an acceptable side picture on the real target area, and make sure that you have good trigger control to actually fire off your shot and make it count and have a 1-for-1 on any and all steel. If you pull your trigger, understand that your iron sights or your dot will never stay at one place. It will actually hop around. So as long as you are in the real target area and you have good trigger control, you will actually hit it and it will fall if it's properly calibrated. An important thing to mention is don't go for audible verification at the famous bing that you have on steel targets. So don't wait for that, and don't wait for the visual confirmation, for example, the popper to fall, because again, that will cost you a lot of valuable time. Hence, again, the importance of shot calling, certainly as it relates to steel targets. I refer to other videos I made that you'll find on my YouTube channel that deal with shot calling, as well as very high quality videos made by other IPSC or USPSA shooters that you can also find in my different playlists. So another thing, especially if you have multiple steel targets or steel targets with paper targets near it, and you need to transition, as a general principle, transition first with the eyes, go to the point that you selected in your walkthrough that you want your iron sights or your red dot actually to hit, and your gun will automatically follow your eyes. Now, what about a miss? This is a question that I actually get a lot during training, especially, but also during matches. Try to get back as soon as possible to the target you missed. So don't go too far. If you have multiple poppers, for example, in line, don't continue too far, because then you lose too much time with the actual transition. And another very important point of attention related to actually spray and pray: don't go to war with steel targets. If you go to war with steel targets, I guarantee you won't win, but the steel always wins. So respect and get good acceptable side picture. Make sure that you have good trigger control, so you can transition efficiently and effectively from one target to another. Another quick side step is actually, depending on the estimated hit factor of the stage you're shooting, short course, medium course, or long course, you really have to consider and have a contingency plan for the event you actually miss a steel target, because sometimes it can be worthwhile to accept the penalty, the loss of point and penalty for not shooting or not downing a steel target, because you lose too much time to re-engage it in the overall time of the stage. But this is something that you have to consider prior, and also determine what your best strategies are. Maybe the strategy is to get back on the target and just make sure that that it's down, especially on long courses, for example. But this is something you really have to analyze in your walkthrough and conclude on your stage plan, to have a contingency for the event that you'll miss a target, whether or not you will actually go back to shoot it, or that you will accept the penalties, the loss of point and the penalties related to it. So on hit factor, I have also videos on it, as well as other great third-party videos dealing with hit factor, so I'm not going to dive too much into that. Related to shooting steel, a question I get asked a lot during my trainings as well as during matches is, should I always and automatically engage and shoot large steel poppers twice? What is the context and what is the thought by these shooters that if they engage large poppers twice, that the popper will actually fall faster, so they can activate swingers, bobbers, or clamshells faster, and actually gain time instead of losing time per shot that they're actually doing, considering that they then always hit the popper, because they will not be the first to actually shoot multiple times on a popper and not always hit it, again even increasing the overall time. So when the popper is correctly and properly calibrated, you get a good acceptable sight picture and you have good trigger control. If all that is okay, as a general rule I would say don't engage large steel poppers twice, because it will have a negative impact on the overall number of shots and therefore also the overall time. And especially if you hit with the 2 shots the popper, then it's okay. But what if you miss with 1 or more poppers? Then the loss in time actually goes up even higher. Then one of the counter arguments that is being raised is that they have seen professional shooters also doing nationals from time to time actually do it and drive down a popper by engaging it 2 or more times. I've also seen it, but it's more an exception than it is a rule, and I think it has more to do with the level of anxiety and stress than a deliberate act to actually drive it down. Why? Because if it really would be as effective as some people think, all professional shooters would always engage large steel poppers automatically twice, and you would see more people actually doing that, and hence the absence of it. It's rather the exception than the rule. I remain with my position that if these 3 things are okay, that it's not a good advice to actually shoot large poppers twice.